Okay, so let's talk about February 2018. You might remember it. This massive weather event, nicknamed the Beast from the East, basically brought the entire UK to a standstill. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what happened, why it happened, and why it's such a crucial case study for your geography course.
So, the big question is why? Why did the UK completely freeze over in February 2018? I mean, how did this blast of Siberian cold just plunge the whole country into chaos? Answering that is, well, it's pretty key to understanding these extreme weather events. So we're going to dig into the science, look at the very real impacts it had, and see how the country tried to fight back.
Right, here's how we're going to tackle this. We've got 5 clear parts. First up, the causes. Then, we'll look at a pretty dramatic collision. After that, the impacts, the official response, and we'll wrap up with the key takeaways you'll need to remember. So, let's start at the beginning. What on earth caused this thing?
All right, Section 1, the causes. So what was behind the Beast from the East? Well, to really get why this was such a big deal, we first have to understand what a normal UK winter is supposed to look like.
You see, most of the time, the UK gets its weather from the west, coming in over the Atlantic Ocean. There's this thing called the jet stream, right? And it pushes all this, well, relatively warm and moist air right over us. That's why our winters are usually just a bit mild and wet, not, frozen solid. But in 2018, something messed with that normal pattern in a big way.
And the culprit has a pretty dramatic name, a sudden stratospheric warming. This all happened way up in the stratosphere, a super high layer of our atmosphere. We're talking about 18 miles above the North Pole, where the air temperature suddenly, and I mean suddenly, shot up by a whopping 50 degrees Celsius. Can you imagine? That huge rapid warming completely threw the weather systems down here on the ground into chaos.
So what you've really got to remember is this chain reaction, this sequence of events. Step 1, the stratosphere warms up like crazy. Step 2, this messes with the jet stream, weakening it and even making it go backwards. And step 3, with our usual shield of westerly winds gone, the door was just wide open, and in swept this freezing cold polar air, all the way from Siberia.
But wait, there's more. The Beast from the East wasn't a solo act. As this incredibly cold air was sweeping in from the east, it was on a collision course with another storm system coming up from the south.
And this is where things got really bad. It created what you'd call a perfect storm. See, on its own, Storm Emma would have just been a bit wet and windy, no big deal. But when all that moisture in its air crashed into the freezing temperatures brought by the Beast, boom, you get massive blizzards. We're talking conditions so severe they triggered the Met Office's highest possible alert, the red weather warning.
Okay, so let's talk about the impacts. How did this perfect storm actually affect the country? We can break it down into 2 types. The primary impacts, so the stuff that happened directly because of the weather, and the secondary impacts, which are all the knock-on effects.
And we have to start with the most tragic primary impact, and that was the loss of life. 10 people, unfortunately, died as a direct result of these severe weather conditions. It's a really stark reminder of how serious this was. And the numbers just show how extreme things got. In some rural spots, temperatures absolutely plummeted to minus 12 degrees Celsius. And on higher ground, some places saw up to 50 centimeters of snow. To put that in perspective, that is nearly 2 feet deep.
Now for those knock-on effects, the secondary impacts. And they were massive. I mean, thousands of schools had to shut their doors. The entire transport network pretty much ground to a halt. Flights canceled, trains stuck. The demand for heating was so crazy high that the national grid actually issued a gas deficit warning. You had people stranded all over the place, and some supermarkets even started running out of basic food items.
And the human stories were just incredible. Take the M80 motorway near Glasgow. Hundreds of drivers were stuck in their cars for up to 13 hours. Some even had to spend the whole night in their vehicles in freezing conditions. We're talking about 1,000 vehicles at a total standstill, creating an 8-mile tailback. Just imagine that.
So, with the whole country in crisis mode, how did the authorities and the emergency services respond? What did they actually do about this completely unprecedented event?
Well, it had to be this massive coordinated effort. The Met Office issued those rare red warnings, which is a huge deal. Police forces declared major incidents, and crucially, the armed forces were called in to help out. The RAF was using their vehicles to get doctors where they needed to be, and the military was out there on the M62 rescuing stranded drivers and even helping NHS staff get to hospitals in Edinburgh. Okay, let's pull all of that together now into a final summary. This is the bit that's going to be perfect for when you're revising this case study.
So, to really nail this down, you can think of the whole thing in 3 simple parts. You've got the causes, that sudden stratospheric warming messing with the jet stream. Then you have the impacts, the tragic deaths, the absolute transport chaos, food shortages, and finally, the responses, those red warnings, declaring major incidents, and even bringing in the military to help.
And all of this brings us to one final, really important thought. The beast from the east was our massive test for the UK's infrastructure and for our emergency services. We know that climate change is making these kinds of extreme weather events more frequent. So, the big question this case study leaves us with is this: are we actually prepared for the next beast?